Hi, this is Marcy Seither. Welcome to the Southern Christian Writer. Today I am interviewing Tara Johnson. She is an author, a speaker, and a very busy mom. I am so thankful that she is here to share with us how God has been using her voice even when she didn't have one. With all that has happened with your family and with Todd, and so many people praying for your family, praying for Todd, praying for your journey, and just seeing how the Lord has sustained you as well as Todd, and just the graciousness that he's had and the answer to so many prayers. It feels like a celebration for me, like, yay, this is perfect.
Yes. We've been traveling through the storm, and now we are slightly through the, halfway point. I feel like we can see the light, the clouds breaking in the distance, and I pray that it stays that way. But yeah, it's God is just so faithful and so good, and I'm just so thankful for all the prayers and the texts and the well wishes. I was told there are churches in Ireland and New Zealand praying for my husband and have been since October. So God is he's been so kind through everything.
Yeah, well, I was just reading through your bio, your website, and one of the things that kind of stuck out to me was when you were talking about all of the historical people that you loved so much, like that you were just so captivated. And first of all, I did watch Gone with the Wind, but it was actually not my favorite. So long. It's like, when is this over?
Yeah.
So, and then the fact that it bumped the Wizard of Oz for all the Academy Awards, I think kind of gave it left a bad taste in my mouth. But anyway,
Well, Wizard of Oz is the goat. I mean, there's nothing that's going to beat the Wizard of Oz, in my opinion. The
yeah,
Wizard of Oz is up there
yeah.
for sure.
But one of the things that you said was, as far as like all the characters of our history, and that is my favorite topic, is history. I love
Mhm.
history. In school, I stunk at everything else, but I did love history. And you had said this: we all battle the same, um, the same thing, and have tendencies, the same junk. I can't read my own writing. Battle the same junk, and have to decide whether to fight or cave, run
Mhm.
or stand, cry or smile. That is what great characters do. How long ago did you write that? And then now to be standing or sitting where you're at and just be able to
Mhm.
say, yes, those yes and yes, God's hands are strong enough to hold the things we put into them. And we do have that choice to fight or to cave, and what it means to stand firm in the Lord. How did that impact your kids?
Wow, I don't know that am a strong person. Any strength in me or any goodness is all God. But I've always told them, because, and some of it's being a Gen Xer. We're raised on hose water and neglect. That's the thing that we're supposed to be. We're tough
No
kids, and then we have
slides, no slides at the park.
That's right. That's right. We could go down those super hot slides in the middle of the summer with shorts on, and we'd see sparks coming off of our legs. And we're like, do it again. Let's do it again. Let's go have fun. Nothing really phased us childhood wise. And then here comes the next generation, and it's not all of them, but some of them tend to, be a little. I call it milk toasty. They're like, whiny. No, suck it up. You can do this. But when they saw my husband's diagnosis, and that you just have to literally, it's not you picking yourself up, it's letting God hold you and not caving into despair. If our peace is based on our current circumstances, that's not peace. It's happiness in the moment. Your strength has to come from something other than your circumstances. And what I told my oldest daughter, I think they've been kind of shocked and amazed. My oldest one has really verbalized it a lot more than the other three have. But she was like, Mom, you're okay. And I said, I am okay. And that's God's peace inside of you. But I said, what you have to understand is that despair, it's fear, and you have to measure the size of your obstacle against the size of your God. God has never once let us down, ever. Ever. Now we mess ourselves up. We rely too much on our feelings and our emotions. But I told her, I said, I'm really not as worried about God taking me out of the circumstance as I am about him molding me into the image of his son through it. And that, if I can keep that forefront in my brain, it really does help.
And then sometimes going back to that thought of despair and
Yeah.
fear, I think sometimes the confusion is in the fact that despair sometimes is because we don't get what we want.
For sure.
So, like, that's that and then we blame it on the fact that, "Well, maybe I'm in sin," like, or maybe
Yeah.
it's not what's best for you, like, you're not gonna get a pony just because you asked,
Right.
like and so
Yeah.
and I just think I wanna go back because I don't know that everybody knows that you were a singer first. Like, so many people that know you know that you're a writer, you're an author, you really dive into the Civil War era, and you've got these I love the covers. Every single book of yours is just it looks like something you would want as a poster, like, just
Oh,
framed poster. It's beautiful, but I don't know that
publishing houses were knocked it out of the park. They were all. I have no can take no credit for any of them.
well, but
They're all great.
that's great. I mean, I really felt like it reflected the story, it reflected the theme and stuff, and so I was listening to your music and stuff, and you had, I was wondering, like, you have Daddy's Hair.
I was a recording artist for years, and I still go into the studio on occasion. If there's a friend that's like, "Hey, can you cut this?" or "Would you mind recording this for my dad's funeral?" or "Can you do some voiceovers?" There's a guy right down the road who's a producer, so I'll pop in there every now and then and just do some easy projects. The most fun I think I ever had with my dad was because my dad's a preacher and he's bald, and I we tell him continually that his head is like heaven because it shines like the sun and there's no parting there.
Yeah.
So I told him we took Daddy's Hands, that old song, and I changed it to Daddy's Hair. And there was a concert I was doing years ago, and he came. So I put him on a stool and rubbed his head as I sang it.
Oh my
And he was every color in the rainbow. He was such a good sport. We had a blast that night. The laughs were pretty good.
god,
So
that's
yeah, I pull that one out every Father's Day. He's like, "Thank you. That's the legacy you're leaving me with." I said, "You're welcome."
welcome. But I do have to say, the old favorite of I'd Rather Have Jesus.
Mm,
Like, I could hear that. We just went on a trip and we saw things that were so old and so sacred, like the cathedrals that took 200 years to build and stuff. And you know what? God is still kings and kingdoms can all pass away,
mm.
but there's something about that.
Something about that name.
Yeah, and
I
so
was wondering if you saw this in Ireland. So when I was in the UK, I think we were at Chatsworth House, maybe the manor there, but I need to go back and look at my notes and see because we went so many places I can't remember. But in one of the little chapels, the little church buildings that are on site, I know they have that in Ireland as well. Each, big landowners had their own chapel and their own um reverend parishioner, and there was one particular chapel that we walked into, and to me it was more impressive than the actual building. But there was a kneeling stone that had been worn away by the knees of the family who were continually in there praying. It was like a huge dip. Did you see anything like that in Ireland? Because I know you were in some beautiful places.
we saw that, but we also saw it when we went to a cathedral in Wells, England, super tiny, it's not too far from Bath, and the stones, when John
Yeah.
was we were walking up the stones, and the stones literally were curved because of the years that
Wow.
the priests had walked over. It had started being built in 1100s. So
Wow.
and that was really kind of, just crazy. And then just to see the old, like, the City of Kings, it was in Ireland, and just to see in those stones, "To God be the glory." And
Yeah.
I'm like, "You know what? Atheists don't have anything like that." To no one.
No, to no one be nothing.
So, I mean, but to get dedicate their lives, their whole world revolved around "To God be the glory," and to the glory of God, zealous for that. But the fact is that we still have carry that torch in us. And
Yeah.
I feel like as writers, we still are the ones to carry and bear that torch and make sure that it gets passed to the next generation. Like, what are we inscribing in our lives, in our children's lives that will
Mm.
last way past when we're here? So,
Absolutely. Well, and like you mentioned, uh, I'd rather have Jesus. It's such a perfect example
well,
of that because It's beyond the here and now. It's beyond cathedrals or stone, but knowing that his word never returns void. And that's the task we've been given, is to keep shining and keep sharing and let it be passed on. Yeah, it's a sobering thing. And to know, some people get so excited when they see their first book, and it is super exciting. Opening up a box and seeing books, and all that work that, but just, I think I sometimes am convicted because I need to stop and pray over these, and not just so much for the books, although it's exciting to hold one, but think about the readers who are going to be reading them, because that's really the where the eternal spark is, or the people that are going to be reading it and holding that and carrying that message on prayerfully to somebody else, and the next person and the next person. It's a beautiful thing.
But when we were gone, one of the things that we noticed was just all of the stone carvings and everything. Like, they didn't
Ooh,
have pneumatic tools and all that stuff.
no,
But how elaborate and how amazingly beautiful and ornate. Like, they didn't just toss up some stuff and say, "Well, we're just gonna give it to God. It's good enough. We're just gonna, push this cathedral out and just call it good." And no, they were committed to excellence. And I feel like as
Lord,
Christian writers, that's the big thing too, is that we need to be committed to excellence, and
yes.
we need to always be learning. And I love the fact that you got your body language certificate.
Yes, that is, people ask me, is that a thing? Can you get a certification in body? I said, you absolutely can get a certification in body language. And my thing is, I noticed a few years in, once I'd gotten the craft pretty well down and I had enough feedback that I could say, okay, I think I know what I'm doing now, but how can I get better? And how can I get better? Well, that's always what we should be striving for. Like you say, that's one of my pet peeves, is when Christians, they say they're making art, but it's the first thing that pops into their head. There's no crafting to it, there's no revision, and they slap a Jesus sticker on it and say, this is art. No, I tell my mom a lot and we laugh. I said, there's nothing scarier than a Christian with a dream, because sometimes we blame God and say, well, he gave this to me. Yeah, but he also expects you to do your hardest at it, to work at whatever you are with excellence. We don't need to throw up garbage. So I was looking at my writing and I thought, man, I'm really bad about saying she sighed or he smiled. My critique partner is Michelle Greep, and she's amazing. She said, your characters smile more than anybody I've ever seen in my life. And so I'm like, yeah, I really need to work on these action beats. Well, at the same time, my son was diagnosed with autism. And I thought, okay, if I'm homeschooling him and I'm supposed to be helping teach him about social cues and body language, I really better know what I'm doing. So I took this body certification course from Joe Navarro. He was with the FBI for 30 plus years. He has an amazing career. You can look him up online. One of the best. They say he's the top in the world on body language. So I got my certification through him. And what I noticed as I was going through it to help, I thought was helping my son, was that my writing just really began to pop. I was able to get into my character's head. I was able to show the emotions that they had inside, and it kind of spilled out onto the page, which was neat, and they came alive in a new way. So I'm like, oh, that's neat. So it makes me think I should just sign up for all kinds of certifications, and then who knows what'll happen next. So
Yeah.
it's that's a neat thing about learning. There's an endless supply of things you can apply.
Well, and I wanted to go back to the singing too, because I think all this ties together.
Yeah.
People didn't know that you were a singer. You had a record company. You were
Yes.
touring. Like,
Yes.
how long had you? Was that your original dream, was to be a singer?
Yes. The very first. I mean, I can honestly say I feel like God was in it, but I'm not going to apply too much to God. But I had this dream when I was 6. I remember I was sitting in my bed. I had been saved at that point. I had just been saved a few weeks before. I given my life to God, but I was sitting in the bed, and I love to sing. And my favorite musical was The Wizard of Oz and Annie and The Sound of Music. Those three I watched on repeat while I was little. And I had this, I was sitting on the bed, I'll never forget it. And I just had this dream. I closed my eyes, and it was myself with a microphone on a stage and a spotlight right here. And I know there's people out there, but I can't see them. And I was singing. And I just kind of tucked that away. I was very shy about it for years. But as I grew into my teenage years, I, got brave and tried to sing in church and do little things, and eventually got my degree in voice. So I had felt from a very early age that God was telling me that he was going to use my voice to reach people for him. That was the plan. That my degree is in music. It's in vocal performance. That's what I do. And I was signed with a record label and touring. And then in the near, I think after about 10, 11 years of touring, I was diagnosed with gastroparesis, where your stomach doesn't pump. It basically means your stomach's paralyzed. And for some people, that's a result of diabetes. For me, they said, you should have diabetes. I said, I'm sorry, I don't. They kept testing me and I don't have it, but they couldn't figure out why. One of the side effects is it gives you really severe reflux and larynx spasms. And so if I book to sing, I would never know from song to song if my voice was going to seize up, if, and it really began to deteriorate quickly on especially how much I could sing. I to this day I can sing 2 or 3 songs with no problem. After that, I need a little break, you know. So if you're booking hour and a half shows, you're pretty well wasted after, 30 minutes of singing and speaking. So I was very confused and I was like, God, I don't know what you're doing. This is not the plan. So I began thinking, oh, I'm like Job. Satan's oppressing me. Or, I was going through all these different scenarios and really getting in my own head about it. And so I began writing. The people I would usually connect with at church concerts or women's concerts and ministries and different things, I began writing blogs and really enjoyed it. And I noticed after a while, I was getting more response from the blogs than I was when I would go tour. Because you go into a place and, you're usually in and out within 2 hours. You meet people, you might have some really neat connections, but you don't have anything else to leave them with other than the words you said or what you sang to them. So, but I was getting lots of response from these blogs, and I've always been an avid reader, especially of Christian fiction. I cut my teeth on Lori Wick in particular.
Mm.
So, growing up, and my husband said, you do all this writing, maybe you should check into writing Christian fiction. I'm like, I'm not a Christian fiction writer. I'm a singer. And I kept arguing with him. And he said, well, there's that conference Julie Lessman was telling you about, because I'd sent her an email and said, I love your books. And she was like, hey, you should come, meet me sometime at ACFW or whatever. That's all she really said. And I mentioned to my husband, he said, you need to go. And I said, oh, it's expensive to go to writers conference sometimes. And he was like, no, just go. And if it's not a good fit, then we'll know. And I was like, okay. So he talked me into it. I was super scared, had no idea, didn't know nobody in Christian fiction, nobody. And I was looking for Julie, praying I would at least have one person I would connect to. And the very first class, I thought, why am I in class? I'm a singer, I'm not a writer. And I was in class and it was about author's voice. And the instructor said, the neat thing about the way we craft words is that it's unique for everybody. You have a unique voice that God has given you and nobody else. And it's like God hit me upside the head. And he said, Tara, you can have a voice and still not have a voice. I'm doing a new thing. Just believe me. So I was like, okay.
You
So I soaked
cried. Did you
in.
start to cry at that point?
Oh yeah. I was just like, okay. Okay. And I do love to learn. But yeah, from that point on, I thought, okay, I'm going to try to embrace this. And I have no idea what I'm doing. I wrote my first novel and thought it was brilliant. Looking back, it was horrible. And I think I submitted it to judging, and the judge said, yeah, you might want to consider being a door greeter at Walmart. So, well, this apparently is not for me. So, but I closed it for a while and then thought about it and thought, I really did like writing though.
Mhm.
So if this is something new where I can have a voice, even if my singing voice isn't working, I'm just going to have fun and I'm just going to enjoy it. And so I signed up for another conference and another and got all the craft books. And I told myself for every fourth fiction book I read, I have to read a craft book. So that's how I made, and I would just apply one new technique every time that I learned something.
Mhm.
And after a few years, it all just started clicking, and I've met a lot of writers that don't want to learn the craft. And I'm like, well, you wouldn't trust a plumber who never you know, learned plumbing. You wouldn't trust an electrician who hadn't gone to school and learned how to wire things. It's the same with writing. We have to just dig in and learn. But it was really fun looking back to see how God just orchestrated all of that, despite my stupidity and my naivete, and but just being willing to say, okay, let's just try it. Let's have fun with it and see what happens.
I think you hear that more often than you don't, as far as,
Yeah.
people who said, "I never thought I would be a writer." It's
Yeah.
just that Lord, I think he uses the least equipped people to do his work. Some people always were writers. They're always going to be
Yes.
writers. They were avid readers. They always wanted to be in the writing industry. But so many more times I hear of people the same as you, same as me, like
Mhm.
least likely to ever write anything for publication. I cut
Yes.
my teeth on Mad magazines, and I was yeah, so I did not read as a I remember even when John and I moved to Minnesota, and we had 3 kids by that time, and I remember my year goal is like, "This year, I'm actually gonna read a book." I'm
So
good and
funny.
I might even read 3. I think I had a 3-book thing. It was one of those things where if you signed up for a book club, then you got a free book bag.
Oh yeah. The bag's the main point.
Yes, and so it's like, "I think I can do it. I think I can do it. I can give away."
You've written more than you used to read in a year.
But I still write more articles. I still love
Yeah.
article writing and article reading.
You're so good
think,
at it. You're
um,
so good at
I think I'm an immediate gratification junkie. Like, books take so long.
Well,
But
my thing is too, it depends on the season because my ADHD is getting worse as I get older. I've heard that goes along with perimenopause and hormone
oh,
changes. But I really have to force myself to the okay, you can't put this down till you finish the chapter because I'll, be off in some other realm doing some other creative thing. So but that's the nice thing is when you find those books that snag you and you can't put it down, you're like, oh, this is some good writing right here. This is
yeah,
good stuff.
yeah, and then also the different genres too. You know,
Yeah.
some people have different genre preferences and stuff like that. So I love it that you, though, have really pressed into that. And what caused you to really love the Civil War era?
So my mom and I would do this thing every year. She started when I was about 12 or 13. She has a list of movies that I'm not allowed to grow up until I've seen them. Now, she knew that I was hooked on all the musicals because, music nerd here. So I knew I can still quote every line of The Sound of Music, know every song. Wizard of Oz, the same thing. But she said, but there are just some that you cannot reach adulthood without seeing these, or I have failed as a mother. I was like, okay. So the first one was Gone with the Wind. So I saw it and I was like, that's like 5 or 6 hours long. And she was like, we're going to take a Saturday when I'm off work. We're going to pop popcorn and get soda and we're going to watch Gone with the Wind. And I was like, okay. So I did it with her the first year. I was like, well, that was fun. I had fun time with my mom, got to eat a lot of snacks, and it was a good story. Although that Scarlett O'Hara, I thought I really don't know if she's the protagonist or the villain. I mean, she's both.
I
She's both.
I think, the strong-willed child would have applied to her.
So, but then we did it. She was like, a year past, she goes, "Are you ready for our marathon?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." Um, and at this point, I was taking history classes in school, but some of the history teachers I had weren't great at teaching history. And I think some of it was because they were trying to meet state standards about dates and battles and all these things, but rarely did they get into the people. What I was interested in was the people. And that's why I thought Scarlett O'Hara was so interesting because she was so vibrant. The best characters, we get to see their struggle with character. That's what, and she had a hard time finding her character throughout this. But I was fascinated by Rhett Butler, and they said he was a blockade runner. So in school, I looked up what were blockade runners and what did they do. And I thought, ooh, that's kind of exciting. So he was like kind of a spy smuggler, but they really didn't get into that in the movie. So each year we would rewatch it, and each year I would get more and more curious about the high points. And looking back, obviously, Gone with the Wind is an incredibly romanticized version of the Civil War. Not super accurate, although it did have a lot of good historical nuggets and backdrop in there. But that is what initially stoked it. And then I began reading lots of Lori Wick book, any Lori Wick book I could find. Anne of Green Gables. I still have the originals, all of my Anne of Green Gables. The covers have worn off. They're the same ones my parents gave me when I was 13, and they're all duct taped together. But so I really just was really drawn towards historicals. But that's about late high school is when I really began to explore interesting people from history. And then history came alive. And still, if you want to make me happy, give me a good biography on somebody that's
Yeah.
older than me. I'll read it all day long. I love it.
Museums and
Oh, yeah.
cemeteries. That's my favorite
Yes.
outing, going to
My
cemeteries.
family. My family made fun of me so bad. My grown kids and my son-in-laws, they were all that mocking me about 2 weeks ago because they said, if you could just go anywhere right now, just to catch a breather for a half an hour, where would you go? I said, I think I'd walk through the cemetery. They were like, are you insane? It's fun. I like going and I like to imagine the life that was lived in those dashes,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, and, like, I grew up in gold country, so in California, so
Oh, wow.
history was so rich. I actually lived on the Pony Express route, and s
Wow.
just to be, like, right where all of the history was happening in California, where gold was discovered, where the Pony Express, where the
Love that.
Transcontinental Railroad came through, Chinese immigrants were coming in. I mean, you had so much stuff, and I just loved it, and there was
Wow.
great cemeteries there, and they would always, our kids were like, "Our mom, she's just obsessed with dead people." So, we always get one. I would say, "What did you notice?" And they would see, like, that maybe the flu went through, and there would be
Yeah.
all they said, "We didn't know so many young kids were in the
Yeah.
cemetery." I said, "Yeah."
1918. Yeah. Hmm.
Or 6 months old or 4 years old, and they had passed
Wow.
away. You could see, like, they were passing away every month. And
Yes.
so, the thing I noticed, though, from back then that really impacted me today and, was the fact that in a lot of those headstones, it would say, she was 42 years, 3 months,
Mm,
14 days.
mm. Yes, that's true.
Yeah, 76 years, 8 months, 18 days. Like, they had all
Wow.
that, and for what it took to create those headstones, instead of
Yes.
just having the date and the dash and the date, it was the
Right.
fact that every day mattered, and I just
Oh, that's so
feel like
good.
we don't live that way anymore. We don't live as if every day mattered, and
No.
yet those older when you go to those cemeteries and you knew what a struggle it was just
Mm.
to live, and when they passed away, they made sure how many days, like, it was
Yes.
how many days, so
That's a story right there.
yeah.
Uh I love that. Yeah, that is to me one of the neatest things about going through the cemeteries and just like you say, you notice all the different, ages and different things that are going on, but just and I like to think about, what was this person like, and just use my imagination on it. If I see they were married right there, but there's another sister buried to them or somewhere, I assume is like
Mm.
trying to imagine their family line and their genealogy. It was interesting. I just discovered this. I've never shared this before in an interview because I just learned this past year. So you're exclusive. But when I was growing up here in Little Rock, I went to an elementary school. It's in the hood because I'm thug like that. But it's called David O'Dodd Elementary. And our teacher told us, I think I was in second grade, they said, you know why our school is called David O'Dodd? And we were like, no. He said, because there was a young man named David O'Dodd. He was a teenager back during the Civil War who was caught spying for the Confederacy. Union soldiers caught him when they came down here and occupied part of Arkansas, and they figured out that he was the go-between passing messages to the Confederate Army. So they hung him on that tree back there in the back of the school property. And I was like, okay. So I kind of tucked that away. And then, every state has their own history that they teach the kids. So Arkansas state history, David O'Dodd would always come up. Well, we bought our house where we're living now a few years ago. And my pastor came to me. He said, that's a pretty cool piece of land you've got. And I said, well, it's just like an acre, in the city. We moved from the country to the city, which I really fought because I didn't want to live in the city. I like being in the country and I still do. But he said, no, don't you know that house you're that on the land? That's the Dodd family land. That was David O'Dodd's house that you are. That's the land that their farmhouse. That's where you are. You're on David O'Dodd's original homestead. And I was like, okay, well, that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
So I see the way the history comes around
yeah,
like that. So, and just a few miles down is Military Road. And I found this out that that's where the Union Army came through when
hmm,
they occupied this part of Arkansas. So history really is all around us. But like you said, we don't pay attention to the days. We don't pay attention. We don't open up our eyes to the value of each day, to the history that's around us, to the effect we have on people's lives. There's so much. And
oh,
I think we get busy and we get in a stupor and just kind of go along with the next thing. But there's so much life around us every day
yeah.
that we
I
miss.
We had the honor, like, I have family history that goes way back to prior to 1600. And that was when we went on our trip. There was the Lord John Chilcot was the first lord of the Chilcot Manor,
Mm.
right out of Wells, England. And so we found it. And I mean, you're driving, you know how driving is
Yeah.
back there. Like,
Oh yeah.
seriously, I told somebody, skip premarital counseling. If you want to get married, go to Europe for 2 days and drive with your potential spouse. If you can
That
survive that, you're good. You're good.
that is an excellent point. I like that. Yeah.
That was a little tense at times, but we totally John nailed it. I was the navigator, he was the driver, but and our phones didn't work the whole time we were there. So
Oh
we
wow.
had like a map, a Google map, and then a
Hmm.
blue dot where we were. And I found where it was supposed to be Chilcot Manor because I knew it was still standing.
Hmm.
So we were going to drive there, and you're driving, you're like, praying, "Please don't let there be a tractor on this road. Please don't let there be"
Oh
like,
please.
there is
Yeah.
no way we're gonna have to disassemble this vehicle and
Yeah.
move it across
Too narrow.
over the hedge before we can pass. And so here we are driving, and I knew that my relative was part of an uprising to the king with the king's illegitimate son, the Monmouth Rebellion in the 1600s, and that's how he ended up getting sent as a slave to Barbados. And
Oh wow.
he eventually came and bought land from Lord Baltimore in Maryland.
Oh
And
wow.
so we're driving down sheep are all over, and there's this farm, and you could see this big, um, big tower, and
Mm.
we drove up to it, and it had Chilcot Manor on the wall, on the rock
Oh.
wall. I started to cry. Of
Oh.
course, I did what any normal American would do. I knocked on the door, told them, "Honey, I'm home."
I've been away for a while, but I'm back.
I
So
went,
you've
"I have
you've been a rebel
my"
from way back.
so
You've
so
got
we
rebel blood.
Yes, well, then they said, "Well, we're renting right now, but, we're right in the middle of a project, but feel free to take pictures on the outside." And I'd taken my drone, so I got some really good shots.
Oh, that's so cool.
And then they said, "You have to go to Wells Cathedral down in the town, and you could see it from the manor." And that was who he was like, a rebellion, like, what was that like to see
Mm.
something that you were like it was an antagonistic feeling, and
Yeah.
so, anyway, to go down into the little town we're walking, and I was thinking, "What if it was the wrong Chilcots?" Like, there's gotta be more
Mm.
than one, and then on the sign, I saw Monmouth, Drive, and so
Wow.
on the cobbled stone, so when we got to the cathedral, I said, "Hey, what can you tell me about the Monmouth?" And he started telling me all about the rebellion, about the fact that so many of them had been publicly executed and the lucky ones were sent as slaves to Barbados. I mean, it was like it was so overwhelming, and the fact that
Yeah.
William Penn also went to that same spot, and my other
Mm.
side of my family were Quakers that were invited by William Penn to come to the New World because they were
Oh, wow.
pacifist, because they would be self-regulating. So to
Yeah.
have that converging of our family history right there and to have it be so real, I just
Yeah.
think is so important.
It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. You're like, look what God did through our family
Yeah,
line to
and
this moment.
I think that it's so important for us to write down these things for our
Mm.
kids and for our grandkids. You're a grandmother, I'm a grandmother, and I just think of how many things that we don't share with our testimonies and the
Yeah.
value of sharing our family stories to the next generation because they can Google everything. Like you said, we kind
Yeah.
of grew up in the hot in the inner tubing on real
Yeah.
inner tubes.
On cement, and we enjoyed it, and
Yeah.
we liked it.
Yeah, double buckle. We knew what it meant to double buckle with your friends because you had 12 people in the Suburban. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think my brother and I wore seatbelts until we were teenagers because we were in the back of a pickup truck down
Oh,
country roads,
yeah.
and that was what everybody did back then. So, there's no big deal.
We had a travel all, and then our sheep gave birth in the back of it. So, I mean, like, seriously, it's hard to look cool with a sheep in your family vehicle, but, you just get over it. So, you just
You
park
should have just come to Arkansas.
park
Nobody would
everything so
have
that
judged. Or,
any liquids will go out that way.
but yeah, yeah. Well, you're right, and that's something I didn't think of until really this past year. But and with my husband being so sick and trying to pass away on us several times, it makes especially your children think about eternity and valuing different things. I'm going to let our other dog out now. There you go. They're both loud today. They both have their voice. But yeah, I would, it made my children really think about legacy. And both of my girls came to me in November. They said, not that this is the time to talk about it, but we've just been thinking about dad and you. And, we know there's a lot of family history, and you've kept old family recipes and handwritten by grandmothers and great grandmothers. And she said, sometime when all this is over, can we go through them with you? I was like, sure, absolutely. Well, I thought, no, I'm going to do one better than that. So for Christmas, part of their gift was I copied every single handwritten recipe and the stories that went with it that had been passed down to me, and bound them and gave them to them. Now, one of my daughters is super sentimental. The other one's very practical. So the practical one said, oh, I'm so glad I needed more recipe ideas because I'm tired of making spaghetti. The other one has it propped up in her kitchen, like on this little pedestal. And she said, Mom, every day I flip through it and I think about the stories that are in there and the handwritten notes from great grandma Fern, or, great great grandma Schmidt. And I think about how hard it must have been for them to do all this with no electricity. And I said it was just a neat way to connect their past. And one thing I told them, I said, now this is our families. This was passed down since 1700s. This is our Swiss family's egg bread recipe. And they were like, so it's really good. I said, oh, it's delicious. But our great great grandfather was in in the village in Switzerland. He was the baker of the town. And so he would even help. This is what I've been told, anyways. He would even help with proposals. He would put little slips of paper inside the bread loaves. So, the young men could, ask his sweetheart to marry him and things like that. And my daughter was like, there's a story in there. I said, oh, yeah, there's a story that needs to be told. So it's such a valuable thing, and it's something that I assume they really wouldn't care much about because they're the electronics generation. But no, when they're coming to me and saying I want to learn more, I'm like, oh, that's prime time. That's golden. You beg for those opportunities, and to just sit and chat and visit. It made it for a really nice Christmas that we could just sit and go through that and look and
Yeah.
and learn together.
I actually did that with some of our recipes. I recreated them, so I had pictures of them, but then also the stories and the pictures and snips
Love
and
that.
rolls and stuff. And like me, when I was in 1965 was when I was born. So it had my grandmother. She had the huge hair, and it was up. And my grandma and me. It was on an Easter, and then it was the year that Joys of Jello cookbook came out. So I did a Jello recipe.
Yeah, I remember that cookbook, The Joys of Jello. Boy, that's a 70s thing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well, it started in the 65 that one was from 1965, and just reading it, like, mayonnaise makes the Jello creamy, like and then the fact that everything was, like, in like, they had all the bundt pans, they had the Jello molds, and so if
Yes.
you added tuna and celery to your lime Jello and then filled the center with potato salad, you had a complete meal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Next Christmas, I'm going to do this and
yeah.
see what my family says. I love that because I mean it does hold everything together.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's all in one. But then to think about, like, what it would have taken before to make anything out of gelatin was a huge deal. So for the commoner, like, to have it be instant, you just think of those things. So anyway, it was kind of funny. Now our kids
yeah.
would be like, "Red dye number 5, why would we feed our kids
Why
that?"
would we do that to our children? Well, I am getting to where I am getting what my friends call crunchy, to where I just want as much natural as possible. But I'm starting to our own grain now. That's my newest kick, is milling, and I've heard that it's so good for you. But then I'm like, yeah, now I know why everyone died young, because they're so tired from constantly having to do everything from scratch. They were tired, but man, big difference in the health benefits and everything.
Yeah.
But it's
That's what
crazy.
we're planning to get a mill this year as well, and
Yeah.
maybe a freeze dryer.
That's the other thing that's on my list. That's on my bucket list,
Yeah.
because the stuff will last forever and it keeps the nutrition in.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
anyway, I just started making my own yogurt, which I was
Okay.
and I'm making
How does that go?
oh my gosh, it's so good. It is
That's
so
probably way better, isn't it?
oh, yeah, it's really good.
Not nearly as sweet, too.
Well, you just make plain yogurt and then you can add whatever you want. So
Whatever you want to. Yeah.
a little bit of even just like fresh blueberries and some granola on it, it's perfect. It's not
Oh,
so bitter, but it's amazing to me after you strain it how much is wasted, like what we're
yeah.
paying for. And
Yeah.
so, and then today I'm making mozzarella cheese. So,
Oh, see, that's my son. He is really into baking. He wants to be the next, I was about to say Gordon Ramsay. No, he doesn't need to cuss that much. He wants to be the next Guy Fieri. He loves Guy
oh,
Fieri. And so that is something that he's been like doing. Like, Mom, can you show me how to make, mozzarella cheese from scratch? I was like, if I could make it, yes. So I've been doing a lot of tutorials, and that's on our list. If we don't lose power from the ice storm coming, we're going to be doing a lot of baking and creating this weekend,
yeah.
and it's
Well,
good. It's fun.
I'm making it today. So if it turns out, I will send you a link and just,
I would love that.
yeah.
I would love that. So what I'd like to tell him is, if he's getting on my nerves, here's some cream. Shake this for about 8 hours and make some butter for it. So
Yeah.
just there's always things you can do to make,
Yeah.
keep him busy. So when you're doing everything from scratch. So
So, anyway, well, it's been great to talk with you. I am so excited about how Todd is doing. And so
thank you so
excited
much.
about the direction that the Lord, what are you, do you pick a word for the year?
I do pick a word for the year. Yes, my word this year is restore.
Hmm.
Restore. He restores my soul. That's been because we're just so tired physically, emotionally, spiritually, feels strong in God, but and his health, my husband's health, we pray for God's restoration on his health, but there's so much you can do with restore. And I think about it's the way you restore, you know, antique furniture or, a broken dish or something. It's not instantaneous. It's steps, it's involved with it. So
Yeah,
being patient and letting him restore. So I thought that'd be a good one for this year. What about you? Do you have a word for the year?
I do. It's intentional. Yeah,
Oh, that's
intentional. So, and as far as like restore, I did a story for the newspaper on art restoration. And
mm,
it was somebody who was a certified art restoration person. And to learn about art restoration and the fact that you restore it with the same care that it was created with.
yeah,
And I just
yes,
think that that's when it says he restores my soul. It's not
yeah,
like he's taken a clump of clay and changed it into something totally different with a different process. No, he's
right.
restoring it back to what his original fingerprints are. And I love that.
So beautiful. It's beautiful. I know because I tend to think of restore, and this is probably the age I'm at, but I think of restore as in like slapping on makeup or speckle on my face to cover up cracks and broken places. But that's not what God does when He
Yeah.
restores. Yeah, like you said, it's intentional. It's a process. It takes time, and it's delicate and it's beautiful. And so, yeah, I love that. That's yeah. Art restoration to me is fascinating. So, like, how do you get to the original layer of paint without
Mm.
destroying it. It boggles my mind whenever I watch. I've seen some documentaries on those, like especially from medieval art and
Oh,
different
yeah.
things. Like, how do you peel that back without destroying what was
Yeah.
intended? It's fascinating. Wow.
Great. That's a great word. Yeah. So intention.
Oh, you are a beautifully intentional person. I love that you are just so incredibly encouraging and creative, and I see purpose in everything you do. I can't imagine you getting up and just watching SpongeBob and wasting the day because you have got so much passion and drive, and that's one of the things I love about you. It's just it's that neat. It's a gift.